Hello! In this video, I'll be discussing half steps and whole steps. It's very important to know half steps and whole steps because they're the foundation of music. A half step is when your fingers touch on the violin. Or on the piano, there's no key that lives in the middle. A whole step is when your fingers do not touch on the violin, when you're going from one finger to the next. And it means on the piano that there is a key that lives in the middle, okay? So I'm going to give you an example. First we'll talk about half steps, okay? Half steps, perfect example would be E to F on the violin. First finger on the D string to low 2 on the D string. Okay, now you see, the fingers touch, all right? If we came to the E string to G sharp A, the fingers touch. So you can see that. That's a half step, okay? Now if we went from E to F sharp, that's a whole step. The fingers do not touch. If we went from F sharp to G sharp on the E string, that's a whole step. The fingers do not touch, okay? So whole steps, fingers do not touch. Half steps, fingers touch. And if you think about piano, if it's easier if you're a pianist or you're thinking about a keyboard, half steps, there's no key that lives in the middle. Whole steps, there is a key that lives in the middle. So if you think about your keyboard, how the keyboard looks, E to F, there's no key in the middle of E and F, or B and C. Those are half steps. There is a key in the middle of E to F sharp, F. So that is a whole step, okay? So half steps and whole steps. In every single scale, you're going to have 2 half steps in every single major scale, okay? So for example, here we have the key of C. In the key of C, again, think about that keyboard if you're a pianist, the E to F is a half step. Nothing lives in the middle. Same with B and C, okay? Those are your 2 half steps in the key of C. So I'll show you on the violin. The half step would be E and F, or open E and F natural, which would be a low 1. Okay, and then B and C. 2 and 3 on the G, 1 and 2 on the A. Okay, so that's the C major half steps. On the violin, you typically learn A major first. Okay, so A major, your half steps occur between G sharp and A, which would be your 2 and 3 on the E string. And also, the other half step is between C sharp and D. Okay, notice I have the key signature here, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp for the key of A. So that means that your 2 and 3 will touch on the A string. Okay, so the half step is there. So it's good to know when you're playing in a key where your half steps occur. Okay, just so that you know where your fingers touch and where they do not touch on the violin. And many times when you're playing some music, it can get kind of tricky. For example, if you're playing the Bach D minor for 2 violins, concerto for 2 violins, it gets a little tricky in those 16th notes knowing where the half steps are. So when you're cruising along and you're playing music, and it doesn't have to be that difficult as the Bach concerto in D minor, say you're playing minuet, the Bach minuets, you don't know where your fingers touch. A great way to help you to know is to put a little V. Like if you're reading the music, put a little V. It kind of makes them look like little cherries, but put a V so you know that those fingers touch. Okay, these fingers touch. So put a little V in there, because sometimes when you're cruising along and reading, there's so much to think about that if you see that V, it's like, boom, okay, I know those fingers touch, okay? So that's just a little tip, a little hint to help you out as you're reading your music. So that's basically half steps and whole steps in a nutshell. Enjoy your journey of half steps and whole steps, because they'll always be with you in music. And until I see you again, happy practicing, be true, be you, be